If there's one thing we can all agree on, it's that humans will believe almost anything. On Blasphemy with Chris and Marnee, we take a look at some of these beliefs, uncover their very human origins, how they've developed and changed over time, and the very real consequences they had in society and culture. Impacts that continue even today in our lives. Welcome to Blasphemy. My name is Chris Setti, and with me tonight, and always, is Marnee. How you doing, baby?
Hey, good.
Good. So tonight, we're going to continue. We're going to conclude, actually, our series on the idea and the belief that we are rational creatures by nature, that humans are just these things built for logic and reason and seeing things as they really are. And in the last episode, we took a look at some things that we know about our brain that stand in stark contrast to that idea. And so tonight we're going to finish that looking at some very specific things. First, though, just as a reminder, you can find us at blasphemypodcast.com. And also, please, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, for instance, just subscribe, rate, review. That'd be fucking awesome. Anything else? No, that's it. So let's get started. So tonight we're going to talk about some more specific things that we've figured out. People, smart people. Over decades and decades of study, right? We've been looking at and researching and doing sociological and psychological and all these different studies and setting up experiments to try and understand how our minds work. And so tonight we're going to look at some of the conclusions and some of the things we know is happening in all of us. If you are human, this shit is happening to you all the time. And as we'll see, maybe in this world that we live in, all the time, right? Because the opportunity for them to operate is constant.
Okay.
So as we look at these, we'll touch on why would this make sense from an evolutionary strategy 32,000+ years ago versus, okay, now we live in this world and what's the consequence? Now, what's the result? What's that feel like? And we'll see. We'll be very familiar with all of these things, by the way. No one's going to go I don't do that. Everyone, if you're honest with yourself, you'll be like, yep.
Oh, but who is actually honest with
I
themselves?
know, but let's just step back.
on.
Let's just step back and drop the ego. I'm going to get real spiritual. Guru now. Drop the ego, man. You can't, by the way, just so you know. That's another belief that you can get rid of that. And don't get rid of that because it's an essential part of your being. But step back from it a little bit and just let's be honest as we go through this. And we'll see that we're very familiar with some of the things that we know about how our brains work. And again, they're going to show that rationale isn't necessarily their goal. These strategies didn't come together for that purpose. There's other purposes, and maybe we need to know that so that we can limit the damage that we do. We're not going to stop. We're not going to solve any of these problems. These are things in our brain. We don't change them. They're not going to be changed. We have to confront them, after the fact. We have to deal with these things that rise up. It doesn't even have to be action, just thoughts, attitudes, perspectives that are all based on these cognitive kind of strategies that we've developed. Yeah,
I think it's just really good to understand ourselves and how our mind and body works so that we can work with it most efficiently.
Yeah, and work with it the way it is.
The way it is, not wishful
and not
thinking.
some fantasy that people...
Not what we imagine or want it to be, but it is.
I really think a lot of damage... I think a lot of damage has been done to people who have been sold a bill of goods on what they're capable of as a human and then feeling like they're failing or,
Right. I hate that. It's predominant in religion and spirituality.
Right.
This... You should be this. And there's more progressive ones that wouldn't use the word should, but they do all these other things to put the should in there silently.
It's not that you should, but if you're enlightened, you will.
Would. Or it's evidence of your spirituality or your knowledge or enlightenment or blah, 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 blah.
Lovely, lovely people. So on the last episode, we took a look at some of the features of our brain that stand against the idea that we are rational creatures by nature. Are we capable of rational thought and logical problem solving? Absolutely. Totally.
Yeah.
Right? We wouldn't, obviously. However, this is an act of intention and not something our brains naturally gravitate towards.
Yeah.
That's what we need to understand. It's not that we're not capable of rationality. It's that just running as we run, that is not what's happening. We have to confront the way we're running in order to engage that rationality, right? We've all experienced that of like being pulled in one direction and then you step back and go like, is this, oh no, that's crazy. Why am I, that's obviously based off of something, that's not rational. That's when you've done that, when you've confronted something that wasn't rational with this ability we have to reason, solve problems, figure shit out. Look at it from a different perspective. None of that's happening deep down though, right? So that's all stuff that we have to do after. Most of what drives our opinions and beliefs happens below these capabilities, though, right? The things that we the beliefs, the things that we feel are like just true. A lot of them, most of them, almost all of them, come from these systems that are way below our capability to reason. We're not thinking these things into being.
Right.
They're coming into being, and then we're thinking about them. Today, we're going to look at the fact that we don't think the way we think we think. We'll do so by taking a look at some of the other things we have found out about the human brain and its capabilities, developments and strategies that came together for our survival in the Pleistocene era and not today. We need to keep that in mind, too, that there's a reason because a lot of people would hear this and go like, why the fuck would we operate this way? Well, because we're not in a world that we're built to operate in because of our own design. But we have to confront that fact, too, and know that we're automatically needing to have a little bit more awareness about ourselves just because the world presents so much opportunity for us to be irrational, and shit. Let's start with numbers we encounter on a daily basis. For instance, consider that there are about 7.8 billion humans on Earth right now. Again, kind of brings that 150 number into focus, right? Remember, our brains came together and they have this amazing feature that our neofrontal cortex is like so large when you consider the ratio between it and the rest of our brain. We stand out in nature, and they think that enables to have the largest flexible social group on the planet, 150 people. There's 7.8 billion of us now, right? And so... But again, what I'm talking about here more is like the idea that 7.8 billion is not a number we can actually fucking get. Yeah. We'll get to this, right? But we say 7.8 billion people. Sure, a lot of people, right? No, that's unfathomably large group of people, right? We can't picture it. We talk about the universe being 13.8 billion years old. If you compress all that time down into a single year, modern humans arrived on the scene at about 11:52 p.m. on December 31st. So if you take the age of the universe, squish it down into 1 year. We don't arrive on the scene until 8 minutes before the end of that till now, right? Basically. Human civilization appears about 38 seconds before midnight. So while humans hit 8 minutes before, this world that we've inherited and built upon didn't happen until 38 seconds before the end. And the average human life then works out to about 0.2 of a second on that scale. So when we say the universe is 13.8 billion years, we're just like, that's a long time. No, that's like crazy long, right? That's like long. And our minds, my point is, our minds can't actually deal with this. So we'll see. All we can do is say, this is a large number. That's it. Astronomers and astrophysicists tell us there are over 100 billion stars in our Milky Way galaxy. They go on to further say that there are about 100 billion galaxies in the observable universe. 100 billion galaxies times 100 billion stars equals a shit ton of stars that we can never possibly even comprehend. On the news, we hear that the current U.S. federal budget is $4.1 trillion. Just as a note, the U.S. national debt is estimated at $20 trillion, and the total money available on the planet is about $5 trillion. So these are just numbers on a fucking screen. Money is just another thing we made up and then made real, making it, quote, work. And I use that term lightly nowadays, right? It has worked and it hasn't worked and it fucking doesn't, But the point is, when we talk about the U.S. federal budget, for instance, $4.1 trillion. There's $5 trillion on the planet, right? We obviously aren't giving money back and forth, right? These are numbers, and they've gotten so big that, they're just beyond our comprehension what that even, means.
Yeah.
It just is like, that's high, or whatever. We hear of billionaires talk of budget proposals of hundreds of millions, trillions, or even quadrillions of calculations being cranked out by supercomputers, and then pretend we even comprehend what these numbers actually represent. Right? We don't.
Yeah.
We really don't. We throw them around and we make decisions and build opinions on it. And really our brain is just like, oh, I don't know. It's just like, that's a lot. Imagine that you have a time machine that you can take back into the past and then back to your current time. You decide to set it to travel 1,000,000 seconds ago, just to look at how these numbers scale. And so you set your time machine, you get in it, and you're like, okay, I'm going to set it to 1,000,000 seconds ago. When do you think you'll come out?
Years, like 20.
20 years, you think?
Yeah.
So you'll actually have traveled about 12.7 days backwards.
Oh.
Just under 2 weeks.
Okay.
So you come back to your time, right? And you come back to our present time, and we're like, fuck it. Okay, let's set it to 1,000,000,000 seconds ago. When do you think you'll come out if you set it to 1,000,000,000 seconds ago?
That's 20 years.
You think 20 years?
I don't know.
Okay. It will actually be June 1989.
Oh, that's 32 years.
31.7 years. People will be dressed like escaped mental patients, and people will be praising the amazing man, father, and role model that is Bill Cosby. Okay, so now we go back to our present time, and we say, okay, we did 1,000,000, 12.7 days, we did 1,000,000,000. Back to 1989, okay? So we say, fuck it, we're going to do 1,000,000,000,000 fucking seconds. How far back do you think it is?
I know it's going to be beyond, like, what I would imagine, so.
Throw out a number.
100 years?
100 years, okay. You'll actually step out in a very strange land, having wound up 31,700 years in the past.
Whoa.
Complete with our ancient human ancestors running around being chased by saber-toothed cats. Right. That is how these numbers scale.
Yeah.
They're not just big, bigger, biggest.
Yeah.
They are fucking gnarly steps that we're taking, okay? So when we throw these numbers like we're just casually billions and trillions and all, that fucking means nothing to us. And when we really get a look at it through some thought experiment like this, we're like, oh shit, that's way bigger than I thought. So when you say someone's a millionaire and you're like, wow, that's a lot of money. Well, he's a billionaire. Oh, so he has like a little bit or a lot more. No, he has fucking unbelievable amount of more money that he shouldn't have. But I mean, that's the fact of this world. What's the point? The point is these numbers quickly scale beyond any ability our brains have to comprehend them. They become symbolic, small, medium, large, or big, bigger, biggest. They have no real meaning in our consideration of thinking because they are way outside of our ability to do so, right? Our brains are not built to, right? In fact, studies have been done to try to determine what is the largest numbers our brain can actually track and kind of, make sense of. Right? So what do you think it is?
I think we've had this discussion
before.
Okay,
but yeah, we probably have. But I mean, what do you think it is?
Well, I think it's 5.
It is 5.
Yeah,
you're right.
We've had this discussion.
We have had this discussion before, but that's an incredible thing to think about. Okay? And people are out there going like, whatever, I can count it. And it's not about fucking counting. Okay? That is, we can teach monkeys to count. Okay? This is how what's the largest number your brain can actually track? They did studies where they'd flash dots on a screen, right? And there'd be like 27 dots for like a second, and they're like, how many? And people are just guessing. Your brain cannot gather that. And yet when they put them into groups of 5 or they put maybe 6 or 7, our brains can automatically break that down into chunks. People are like, well, what about 10? 2 5s. What about 7? 5 and 2. And what they found is our brain really is keyed in on number 5. And that makes fucking a lot of sense if you think about these things coming together 30 plus thousand years ago. We didn't have 1,000,000 choices to do anything. We didn't have 100 things to track. We didn't have a dozen fucking things to worry about. had our family, our tribe members, the stuff we could carry, our important weapons and there wasn't this need.
And I just have 5 fingers on my hand.
5 fingers. I mean,
it's pretty basic.
There could be.
Keep track of that. Keep track of my fingers and my toes.
So in a world full of millions, billions, and trillions of all kinds of things, we are stuck with brains that can really only deal with what we can count on one hand. We're really kind of fucked in this sense. We also developed a vast array of cognitive strategies along our development, features and functions that propagated and became established based on their efficacy towards our survival. These are features that have nothing to do with making us more rational, smart, or having us somehow being able to better understand reality and truth. That was not the goal of this, right? Mm-hmm. These are processes that occur within the limbic system. Remember, we talked about that last time, right? Mm-hmm. That's that part of our brain where there's no words, there's no thinking, there's no language, right? But it's also where all of the things are running that bind us to people, that create social and nurturing and parental relationships and mating relationships. And all these things are driven down there, right? They aren't subject to human thinking or rational analysis. They are running below our conscious awareness as we play catch-up by assigning reasoning on top of the opinions, beliefs, and decisions that result from these functions. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of these. And the first one I want to talk about is a term. It's called apophenia. Have you ever heard of that term before?
Don't think so.
Okay, we'll start here because this is kind of an umbrella term that a lot of other functions rely upon. It is also maybe a misnomer. The term itself was coined in 1958 by a neurologist in Germany named Klaus Conrad. He was studying schizophrenia, specifically in patients, focused on what was deemed to him, quote, the unmotivated seeing of connections accompanied by a specific experience of abnormal meaningfulness. He came up with this word by combining the Greek words for away from, apo, and the word for to show, phanein, based upon his observation that these delusions were first experienced as revelations by the patients, right? So he was working to understand how their brains, even though they were seeing hallucinations and delusions and things that weren't there, their brain they accepted it readily as a revelation, as truth, as meaningful, right? Even in the most chaotic delusion and hallucinations, they would find this meaning, right? This thing that made sense somehow to them or gave them purpose or something like that.
And it was called what?
Apophenia. Okay. So while he was using it very specifically, it has come to be used maybe inappropriately in a much broader sense. The term apophenia was adopted to define the human brain's tendency to find something meaningful in random data or occurrences. So from there, scientists kind of borrowed that term and then made it a more general term to relate to just everyone's brain's tendency to find patterns and meaning in things that aren't actually meaningful and they're random.
Yeah, okay.
So he was studying in schizophrenics specifically, coined this term for them, and then it kind of ends up getting borrowed to define a general human characteristic, not just schizophrenics, right? Yeah. And we'll see, they've also kind of like, well, here we'll talk about it right now. Some research scientists have chosen to adopt the term patternicity, preserving the intended meaning of apophenia and more generally describing what is going on.
Yeah.
So I'll talk more maybe about it called patternicity, our brain's tendency to find patterns in whatever it's looking at.
Yeah.
There are a few manifestations of this phenomenon that have been identified by research scientists. For instance, there is a category called pareidolia, which is a form of patternicity that is focused on visual or audio stimuli. One way this has been culturally demonstrated is back in the 80s and 90s when millions of teenagers were shown how playing their evil rock and roll records backwards will reveal dark messages from Satan, put there on purpose or through demonic influences to corrupt the youth. Their brains were picking up false patterns and random sound, processing them as meaningful information, filtered through all their subconscious shit, thus leading to Satan talking through backwards masking. I actually had an interesting experience. I heard a lot about backward masking as a teen, Christian teen in the 80s. But I do remember being at a summer camp one year, and a guy was there, and he fucking debunked all this shit, which I thought was crazy. It was awesome. I was on the edge of my seat because I'm like, yes, finally. And he started playing. So a very famous backward masking song is a song by Styx. First of all these parents up in arms over the evil music of Styx. Fucking go listen to Styx. Is the stupidest. Anyway. Their song Crystal Ball was seen as containing messages from Satan if you just play it backwards. Dude, they're called Styx. The river Styx. Hades, hell. It's obvious. They're talking about Satan. And this motherfucker at summer camp was on stage, and he played Crystal Ball backwards a bunch of times. And every time, he would tell us exactly what to hear. And I swear to fucking God, you heard it every time. He'd be like, the first time he like said, I want you to hear like, serve Satan, kill, whatever. And you're like, oh, everyone's like, holy shit. And he's like, okay. And I distinctly remember I don't remember any other statements, but I just remember the Satan one. And I'm just like, oh, okay. And then the next one, he's like, I was walking to the produce aisle at Vaughn's. We were all California kids, right?
Yeah.
So we had Vaughn's. And dude, clear as day. And everyone started fucking laughing. And then he goes, oh, you want to see it again? And he goes, this time. And every single time he primed us to hear, and our brain just sought that pattern out and found it.
Yeah.
It's fucking pretty crazy. This also accounts for how we see shapes in the clouds, a face made up of rocks on the mountainside. You ever see that? Like, there's a lot of rocks.
Yeah.
The old man rock or the, whatever. That's actually called mimetolithics. That's when our brain arranges natural rocks and kind of geographical features into patterns that aren't really there. And, of course, the Virgin Mary on a piece of toast, right? Exactly. Or Jesus in a water stain or whatever. There's all kinds of that shit.
Yeah.
Another is known as the gambler's fallacy, which causes our minds to interpret perceived patterns in random numbers or colors as signs of an impending event, such as a jackpot win.
Magic numbers.
Yeah, like gamblers will sit there and like, oh man, twos have come up so much. It's got to come up again, right? And that's our brain finding patterns in random things that are happening and thinking, oh, I've got this worked out. It's called the gambler's fallacy.
We've had an experience of someone doing that and being like making meaning out of numbers.
Oh, yeah.
And thinking that was God telling me I'm supposed to marry this person, and they're divorced now. Oops.
It's amazing. It's amazing how that works. Or maybe you got super into weird Christianity and have heard of equidistant letter sequencing, where secret codes from God are revealed by forming words through skipping letters at regular intervals in large portions of the Bible. This is an example of a form of patternicity called the clustering illusion, and it occurs with very large sets of data which allow for more opportunity to find meaningful patterns. For example, you can also find messages in the Iliad, War and Peace, or any other sufficiency, or any other sufficiently large set of data. This is random and coincidental, and yet our brains work very hard to make it mean something when it actually doesn't mean anything at all.
Yeah.
And so there's all this stuff of Bible code. You can find books and watch YouTube videos and listen to fucking Chuck Missler or who the fuck you listen to. And they'll tell you, no, if you just take the 14th letter through the book of Joshua, it forms in Hebrew. And you're like, the original Hebrew? You mean from the original manuscripts? That's been translated. Like, fucking, those letters aren't the same they've always been, first of all. But they're like, no, the Bible says nothing's ever been changed. God's word will never be changed. You're like, using the Bible to prove the Bible's true, that's a problem. But you can do this in anything that's long enough. If you have enough letters. And so you take a big ass fucking book like War and Peace, this giant ass book, you can find all kinds of shit in there. And people are like, yeah, but is it contextual? Oh, you can find prophecies about Kennedy being shot and stuff in these books because it's just huge.
Yeah.
And so if you search long and hard enough and you have computer programs that crank through all these possibilities, eventually our brains will determine patterns where they just fucking aren't there. So stop that. So now let's talk about confirmation bias. This is one you've probably heard about before.
Yeah.
Our human brains are not on a search for reality or for what is correct. Everything is driving us towards survival, and with humans, that means tight social bonds being maintained and not put in jeopardy. That is the biggest underlying point we need to get tonight.
Yeah.
Our brains are key to tie us into a social group and keep us fucking in that group, right? Because it thinks to be outside of that group is death, probably. Activities and ideas that threaten those connections are strongly repressed in our brains below our conscious awareness. As such, we humans tend to seek out information that props up our already held beliefs and opinions rather than information that challenges them. If we are plugged into a social group, don't rock the boat is our brain's main focus.
Yeah.
And so, a very interesting thing about our brains is it's not let me find what's right. It's let me find what confirms what I already believe so that I can stay where I'm at, One of the earliest scientific demonstrations of this cognitive bias was presented in conclusions based on experimentation by a researcher named Peter Watson in 1960. In it, the leader of the experiment had a group of students try and figure out the rule he was using as he laid out a sequence of numbers. Ever seen those little things like, what's the rule here? And it's like 1, 2, 3, and then 5. And then, it's like, oh, well, you're adding these numbers or you're skipping,
right.
you know what I mean? So what he's doing is he's laying out a number sequence and he's got a group of people and he's like, figure out what I'm doing, what my rules are. Okay. And in this experiment, he's always changing the rules. He's never like, it's not about figuring out the rules. It's about how they're figuring out. Exactly. Okay. As the experiment went on, students began forming hypotheses about the rules, and even though totally incorrect, they continued to build upon their confidently held opinion, even when information making it impossible was presented. Though the reality and effects of this bias have been written about in psychological papers for a long time, the term confirmation bias itself didn't appear until a 1977 paper dealing with the subject. So there's been countless writings and experimentation that have tested this thing. Yeah. But as far as a label that we give it, it was 1977 when confirmation bias was named, but it's something that we've been aware of for a very long time. And like I said, back in 1960, they were doing these things, and what they found was, so when someone would say, oh, I think it's this, and as he started to change the rules to move it away from that, they just kept finding reasons why they were right and ignoring the shit that was clearly showing they were wrong. Okay, it's going to get fun. It's going to get worse. There are many manifestations of this bias in all of us, all the time. However, they have created some categories based upon sociological and psychological studies. The first is called biased search for information. This is why we have CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, OAN for those too crazy for Fox News, the Young Turks, and on and on and on and on and on. Having our internally held beliefs challenged is highly stressful as our minds work to keep us from upsetting our current situation and winding up on the outside, something potentially lethal 32,000 years ago, right? In fact, we even had to come up with a name for what it is like when you are confronted with two ideas in your mind at the same time. One that says you are correct and the other that presents evidence to the contrary. It is known as cognitive dissonance. That's right. This is a very uncomfortable state we have all experienced, and human brains resist facing it as much as possible. Maybe you've, experienced that before when information comes in, challenges something you believe to be true. Yeah.
I feel like I fucking live in it.
Yeah. It's a very uncomfortable state, and our brains work very hard to suppress it and keep it away. And it doesn't do so by leading you to the true thing. It does so by confirming stuff you already think and believe to keep you, in the group. We've recently gotten to witness one of the most common ways this feature of our brains is taken advantage of. Confirmation bias is fed and strengthened through repetition. Cults, religions, politics, and marketing long ago figured out if they just keep saying shit, the same shit, we will line up with it eventually and then reject any information coming in that shows it to be false or misguided. The election was rigged. Yeah. How many times do you hear that? Every speech, you hear the same things. These are political talking points. And it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. You'll hear these talking points. Like right now, the Republicans are against the fence. And you hear all these fucks trying to defend Trump and this impeachment shit. And they say the same phrases. When they're asked direct questions, they go revert back to the fucking phrases. There was fraud. Stop the steal. Whatever they're trying to do. Now it's unconstitutional to impeach a non-sitting, president that's out of office. That's all you hear them say because they just want that to get into you as a bias. Okay. Because then you'll reject any information to the contrary, right?
They said the same thing on the left about Bernie. They stole it from him. It was rigged.
Right. I mean, that's what I'm saying is like this one way that this bias is taken advantage of on purpose. Okay. Yeah. They know if we just keep telling them this, if we just keep saying this over and over, eventually they'll accept it as true. And then they will reject anything coming in that confronts it. And we've got them, So the next category is biased interpretation. In 1979, a Stanford University study was performed around this bias. They gathered two groups of participants, one made up of people who were for capital punishment and the other with people who were against it. The researchers provided both groups with the same set of information. In the end, nobody changed their opinion and typically had strengthened their already held views. When asked to justify their conclusions, they presented the information that confirmed their current opinions while rejecting or considering inferior any evidence to the contrary, right? So again, they're just testing to see like, will they take into account this information that clearly shows that maybe they're off on this opinion? And what they found was never. It never did. I've read about all kinds of experiments and studies around this where they gather people with people truly trying to find out a way, can we change people's political opinions if they're fucking crazy? If they're a fascist, can we show them stuff? And really, most of the results always show that whatever you got, you strengthen.
So is it that it has to be an internal choice? It can't be someone on the outside.
Yeah, and that would be so hard to even simplify down to why, but there's probably so many factors based off of
because we changed completely.
I know, and I have to go like, well, there were other factors at work that allowed us to do that. But our brains definitely worked against us in that. There was a lot of stress.
Oh, yeah, it was super stressful. I'm just saying it's possible.
It's possible.
But I think that it was instigated internally, not externally.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, there had to come a time where the intention was this, with also the acceptance of this might change me drastically. But our natural state isn't to do that. Like, that took some kind of, like...
No, we chose with an awareness that we were going to be ousted from our social group.
Right. The last category we will look at when it comes to confirmation bias is biased memory. As humans, we tend to remember things or pull memories up that are in line with our current beliefs, or that at least confirm them. One extremely problematic result of this is the forming and maintaining of stereotypes. Time and time again, it has been borne out in experiments that when it comes to our brains, memories that confirm our expectations or ideas about a social group or label, even though we can understand it is totally rational that individuals are different and cannot possibly be defined by a group of stereotype, we seem to more readily remember information and experiences that confirm them, rather than memories that disconfirm them. Not fucking great, right? This is why challenging your bias when it comes to societal divisions, bigotry, and stereotypes is so crucial. You are not naturally accepting of all people. I don't care what you fucking say. No one is, because our world is fucking with our ancient brain. It is also why we should listen to people who get their shit together and turn over a new leaf. You were never smarter than them. Maybe they had more programming early on that built a subconscious pool of information to express their bias than with you. And maybe you had opportunities to confront your bias before then because of social groups and environments you found yourself in. Whenever it happens, we should celebrate rather than drag them all over the internet for being a hypocrite. Just my opinion. So this is something that bugs me. We are not naturally unbiased, unprejudiced, unbigoted. We are not.
No, yeah.
And I'm not justifying that. It's horrible. We shouldn't be. But we have to be real and go, nobody. I hear people like, I just accept. No, you're not. No, you're not. Yeah. You have all kinds of groups and stereotypes and shit roaming around in your brain that you fucking think are wrong, bad, disgusting. Who knows? And I think in our day and age, what's interesting, I'll see people be like, you know what, I was a fucking racist and I confronted that. And now it sucks that I wasted that time and I want to do good now. And then I see them get just lambasted, you know, just pointing. And I'm just like, how? I don't know what to do with that. I just bring that up because it bothers me sometimes. I feel like anyone who does that should be like, hey, good for you, man. Good for you. Now do something about it. Fucking change things. You know, make it right. Instead of, oh, yeah, well, what about 1978 when you said this? You know, and you're just like, what the fuck? Shut the fuck up. By a bunch of people who probably weren't even born in 1978, and they fucking don't know what the fuck they're talking about either. We spent a lot of time on confirmation bias because in our world of information, it is literally our default mode. People don't Google trying to prove themselves wrong, and they certainly don't do it to prove someone else they perceive as outside of the group or category right. Right? It's like, Google, why am I right? That's pretty much what our Google searches are, right? Confirm this for me. And with that segue, let's talk about another very powerful bias that is in overdrive in our highly connected and yet infinitely divided world. Have you ever heard of in-group bias? I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, honestly, the name.
Groupthink.
Group thinking, yeah, that's part of this. That's right. That would be one category of, like, one way this manifests is in group thinking. Yeah. Excellent. Right. So this is one of the most powerful forces at work against any idea of rationality in human thinking. What drives this bias is a molecule, a hormone that serves as a neurotransmitter in our brains, a drug, really. And we are super addicted to it. Something evolution made sure of. This chemical is known as oxytocin, and we have given it all kinds of descriptive monikers such as the love molecule, the bonding hormone, or the social molecule. Our brains are bathed in this powerful neuroactive chemical whenever we touch, hug, have sex, eat with friends, hold hands, cuddle, tell our kids we love them, or even just spend time in the presence of another. Well, another in our group. You see, while this chemical bonds us very strongly to partners, friends, family, lovers, and the like, it also creates suspicion, distrust, and even disdain for those deemed outside. It's easy to see how this would be a very important development for our survival when all of this came together. In a world where the only people you could trust were those in your tribe, being tightly connected to them while on high alert for anyone and anything else made for a much better chance of the survival of all, right? I mean, this is just evolution that happened to us, and it gets manifested in really ugly ways now, in really terrible ways, and really irrational, unreasonable ways. But we got to confront the fact that this is where it starts, and that's what we need to deal with, you know? Instead of going like, everyone should be, I mean, we need to like,
or like
teach
shaming,
people.
like you're evil. No, that's
that
actually natural, but let's become aware of our natural hormonal ways of functioning and look at the decisions we're making and all of that, but not like, you're an evil person for being tribal or whatever. Yeah.
You can't go, I'm not going to be, biased towards the people in my group. That's impossible. But you can go, okay, I'm biased towards the people in my group. How does that make me deal with other people outside of my group or that I perceive as outside of my group?
And here's the confusing part about that too, is there is still need to be suspicious of people you don't know.
Sure.
So there's this, natural sense of having to protect yourself, but do it with awareness and not from the limbic system of just reaction.
Right. Not just like, well, this must be true because my brain's telling me, However, today, it just makes us all break into different groups, holding completely different realities, unwilling to even engage with those in other groups. Of course, this development to bond us closely with a small group of tightly knit, intimately connected members depending on each other in every way is completely fucked up in this world of virtual associations and group identities. Today, you may be a husband or wife with a family, one tribe, but you both have jobs, other tribes, and within those jobs, you are a part of a team or a division or a group, a whole bunch of other tribes. Maybe you consider yourself part of a particular religion, another tribe, but then further divide up into a denomination, another tribe, and then a particular church community, yet another tribe, and you can layer on and on politics, social classes, whatever, all kinds of shit.
Yeah.
We're not members of tribes anymore.
Right.
Fucking
we're members of lots of different
so many
tribes. That's confusing.
that our brain is trying to tie us tightly to, but have whole disparate goals and beliefs and it is fucked. We're fucked. Okay. 150 people. Remember, that's what our brains. Yeah. I mean, I worked at a company that had 8,000 people in it. So you see where I'm going. Layer onto that all kinds of political, social, class affiliations, and our brain is trying to keep us plugged into countless groups, all while making sure your connections to them are not in danger. You may say, yeah, but some of these are kind of meta groups and not real social groups. That is true because of the world we built. The problem is your brain doesn't fucking know the difference.
Yeah.
That's a big problem.
Yeah.
Is, again, we think the way we communicate and all this stuff is just so natural. Our brain is constantly thinking it's dealing with people face to face and being confused with, all this virtual stuff. Now let's look at something that's really interesting. So this cognitive strategy is something we have all experienced. Have you ever obsessed over something like a car or a paint color you want to use in your home? You look at pictures of it, build it online, stare endlessly at paint samples. Whatever it is, you're fixated on it. Then, the next thing you know, every dumb motherfucker you pass on the freeway has stolen your idea and bought your car. Or every restaurant and design store you pass has nicked your idea, and now they are shoving it right in your fucking face. What a bunch of assholes. Believe it or not, this is not indicative of a conspiracy to undermine you or steal all of your good ideas. It is actually due to a very powerful and important cognitive strategy that the human brain developed. It's referred to as observational selection bias and defines how our brains kind of tune in to what we're currently focused on. Remember, we have all these limitations. We can't fucking focus on everything, right? And so when we fixate on things, our brain tends to tune in, right? Kind of creates a filter where only that shit's getting in and other stuff you're ignoring.
Yeah.
You can imagine. Oops, go ahead.
I know that, so I actually that's what I do. It's like the concept of setting intentions and stuff. The thing, and in hypnotherapy, we learn the thing that your mind focuses on, your subconscious mind tries to make happen or bring about, right? Or, so I don't necessarily set resolutions at the beginning of the year. I just set intentions of this is what I'd like to see develop in myself personally, professionally, whatever, through the year. And I know that just setting that in my focus, I will start seeing those things and I will gravitate towards those things. I will find things that will make that happen.
Exactly.
Because that's the intention that I set. So,
Exactly. And that's a consequence of this very same thing, right? Yeah. And probably all these things kind of are interrelated and working together, right? It's not like, this one thing is, all these things are working always.
It's a way to use the way our brain is in a positive way.
Yeah. And we'll see that there's some disadvantages to this that we also need to be aware of.
But it's not. It's but we're becoming aware of how our brain works, so to avoid its pitfalls and use what it can do.
Right, exactly. You can imagine how advantageous this would have been in a world where all of our attention was fixated on survival. We would get hungry, needing food soon to stay alive. It's all we could think about. Find the food. It's easy to see how having our brains process our environment in a way that is keyed into anything having to do with finding food or water or shelter or whatever we needed would be very beneficial, right? You don't want to be like, I'm going to starve to death soon. I need food. And then you're walking all of a sudden distracted, look at those flowers over there. Isn't that cool? Next thing you know, you're lying dead next to a little patch of flowers, right? Your brain was like, filter out anything that doesn't have to do with signs of where there's food, right? Or, that kind of stuff. And you can see how beneficial that would be. The thing is, in this world where survival is a grocery store or a friend's couch away, this bias finds all kinds of things to trigger it. Maybe you've prayed for something you desperately want or need. Or maybe you've said, universe, give me a sign. We tend to find our way to these things, within reason, of course, because this obsession leads our minds to being dialed into anything that gets us towards the goal we are set on. which is actually kind of amazing and leads to accomplishing some big dreams. I mean, this is why people can make shit happen, because they go like, you know what? I'm going to make this happen. It's the only thing I'm thinking about night and day. I'm reading about it. I'm writing about it. I'm researching it. I'm thinking, I'm planning, I'm doing this. I'm getting all this. And so their mind is just tuning in and they're seeing opportunities that will get them towards that goal, which is fucking awesome, right? Then, of course, crediting some all-knowing space phantom for making it all happen, right? They're all like, God, please. And then they do all the work and they're like, thank you, God. Should thank your brain.
Thank your brain.
However, this is a bias. Like all of these strategies, this observational selection evolved during a particular world with very different realities to this one. In this world, while it can have us focused and seeing pertinent information, it can also have us missing or ignoring important, even vital information. Yeah. You know, because these things are a matter of survival. You know, our brain was developed along these lines through like vital processes. Water, food, shelter, whatever, you know, like things that kept us alive. Yeah. They don't really operate that way anymore in us. Yeah. It's more things we want, things we're thinking about, things that we're aspiring to. The problem is when your brain is like dialing into that like it's survival itself, you're also going to miss stuff that could be potentially beneficial, and it could be beneficial, like detrimental. You know, we'll miss things that maybe caused this whole thing to crumble because I was so fixated on this and my brain didn't even see this other information or this other sign of things that I need to consider. You know what I mean? So it is a bias. It keys us in, and that's great. But along the way, we also have to be aware that, oh, I need to have a broader perspective to see things that are in my blind spots right now because I'm so tunneled in on this shit, right? We call it tunnel vision. This is kind of like that, right? And our brains do this all the time, and it helps us out, and it also creates issues, you know, like I didn't see that coming. Yeah. The next one we'll look at is status quo bias. So complete this saying, if it ain't broke,
don't fix it.
Exactly. Or maybe you've gotten into a political discussion where the word progress comes up, being met by someone saying, yes, but what is progress? I hear that all the time. While they argue that not only are things fine the way they are, but they were even better back in the glory days before all this supposed progress. Both of these capture the spirit of this particular cognitive shortcut. The status quo bias defines the tendency for humans to believe that current or traditional ideas are automatically and always better than new, more progressive ones. As you can imagine, this bias is typically bolstered and strengthened through traditionalism, religion, and conservative politics. The underlying belief here is obviously false, since all of the lives that we are living right now, the status quo, our status quo, is 100% the direct result of centuries of progress. Yeah. We got here through dedicated and passionate people fighting against the fucks who were saying change will only make things worse. Everyone thinks that it was better in the good old days, but that is only because we are unable to actually experience life then. You don't have to go far back for it to be terrible. It sucked. You died young from diseases that are easily cured or avoided today. Most of your kids died young, many not surviving birth. Very few people were rich, so you were likely living in misery, filth, with few opportunities for happiness. That's the reality of the good old days, by the way. I know everyone likes the days of whatever. Fuck off. When we place this bias in its evolutionary context, we can see how this would be valuable from a survival standpoint. If things are going well, you have food, shelter, your tribe is safe, the last thing you want to do is upset the status quo. Yeah. An inadvertent wrong move could be our doom, so better not make one until it's absolutely necessary. The problem is, this does not translate into building, growing, and fostering a multicultural society of 360 million people. We built this world that fucks with our brain, leading to immense societal ills. The least we could do is work to fix the shit when there are clear issues to be solved and improved, right? So this whole idea of like, let's just keep things the same. Things are fucked. Like, the least we could do is try and, you know, solve some of these problems. You will also find that those leaning strongly on the status quo bias tend to be people who experience little in the way of discomfort with the way things currently are. To those people, I say, maybe you'd like me to bleed you a little to see if that will help with your brain tumor. Fuck off. I love that. They're like, yeah, but what's progress? Everything your life is built on.
Yeah.
Everything. Every fucking thing you are and get to have and get to do and how long you get to live today is because people went, this is not good enough. Yeah. We need to make it better.
Yeah.
And so the status quo bias, again, rooted in our evolutionary past, made a lot of sense, right? We had a small tribe. We weren't fucking progressing, so like we didn't have to worry about that. We're all dependent fully on each other. And so, let's not change things. Things are good, But now, just completely we're all fucking going nuts with this one. How about one called negativity bias? Now, this one we are likely all very familiar with thanks to the continual saturation of news and world events. There is a hardwired feature into the way we evaluate information. The human brain tends to weight negative information and bad news as more valid, true, or meaningful than the good or positive. Again, this totally makes sense when you consider our ancient ancestors. The things that were going well were fucking gravy, right? No need to fret over that stuff. It's the shit that was going bad or signs that were not positive that needed their attention, right? I mean, if things are good, you're like, great, just let those go good. We don't have to give them attention, But it's the bad shit. It's the negative shit. It's the dangers that we need to be aware of. And so we evolved this negativity bias that we tend to see bad news as more important, weightier, more relevant, right? Because it will keep us safe 32,000 years ago. However, in this alien world we have built, this bias is hijacked away from its beneficial function to one that has us evaluating ideas and opinions on a much broader scale through this lens. It is a demonstrable fact that we are living in the safest, most peaceful, most educated, healthiest, most prosperous time in human history. Yeah. Not even a contest. However, most would say things are worse than they've ever been.
Yeah.
As we consume the news and information around us, always giving more weight and importance to the bad stuff.
That's what Steven Pinkerton's Better Angels of Our Nature.
Yeah, the Better Angels of Our Nature.
Was about. And how
It's Steven Pinker, not Pinkerton. Those were the famous investigators from the 19th century train time. The Pinkertons.
Steven Pinker.
Steven Pinker.
And that he was saying that was it him? That we have to people are afraid to look at the positives and say actually that we are the most peaceful. Things are the best that they've ever been because of progress, because we always want to push it to be better, because there are things that aren't okay going on. And if we talk about it as if we've achieved greatness, then we won't try to fix the things that aren't great. And so they push to no, you have to focus on the bad, or people will get comfortable in the status quo.
So interesting. So, I mean, these things, you can see this machine of strategies that have pushed us forward in totally, maybe ways that are outside of what evolution kind of brought these things. I mean, not that it was thinking, but I mean, the purpose they came together evolutionary, and then, now they're I don't know. It's very interesting. It's pretty weird. So now let's talk about something called the bandwagon effect. This particular cognitive strategy is likely tied to the biochemical pull of the in-group bias. It's kind of another form of groupthink, like you said earlier. In the 1950s, a research scientist named Solomon Asch conducted some psychological and sociological experiments. He would have a room full of student volunteers seated in a classroom. The only task they had was to respond whether they agreed or disagreed with a series of statements presented on cards to the class. For example, one card might read 2 + 2 = 4, and their role was to raise their hand if they agreed that was a true statement. The thing is, everyone in the room, except for one student, were in on the experiment. The students who were in on it were given instructions to periodically all raise their hands when false statements were shown, right? So 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah.
As he conducted rounds and rounds of these scenarios using hundreds of test subjects, it was observed that over 75% of the time, the naive participant would go along with the group when they supported the accuracy of obviously false statements.
Yeah.
And you can just imagine yourself in this room. And someone puts this thing in and you're like, well, that's wrong. And then everyone's hands goes up. Everyone felt that pressure, the social pressure as kids and teenagers. You're like all slip your hand up like, this is dumb, but I don't want to be seen as I'm not right.
Doubt yourself. You're like,
right.
What am I?
The name coined for this powerful drive to go along with a group, even when their ideas or actions run contrary to our actual thinking or consciences, is the bandwagon effect. Mm-hmm. I mean, say you're a part of a major world religion and you find out that a whole shit ton of people in there were abusing children. Mm-hmm. What do? Right? Yeah. A lot of people chose to, I'm just not going to look at that and just stick with it, right? The bandwagon effect. It, even though it goes against our conscience, even though individually we would say, that's horrible, we make excuses, we find ways to confirm our biases, all these things work together, and this part of this group think, we don't leave the group because our brain is like, leaving that group is death.
Okay, so that brings to mind a time in my life when I switched bandwagons, and it was difficult. So we were members of a church, and then we became leadership in a church. So I was now part of the pastor's wives as opposed to just one of the ladies in the church.
Right.
And I remember sitting in the car going to some pastor's wives event, and the bandwagon of pastor's wives was talking about how the women just aren't committed. They just aren't passionate about God. And what is, just this whole perspective of the women of the church weren't as holy as the pastor's wives thought they should be. And at first I was going along, but I had to step back and go, wait, just a few months ago, I was those women, and I was intimate and close with those women. It was good friends. We shared openly and vulnerably with each other, and they were passionate. And so I spoke up and was like, well, but I've prayed with those women. I've shared with them. I've sat with them. I've cried with them. They are, and she, the lead pastor's wife, snapped, shut me down. So there's this, and so there was this conflict of who's right? Am I right? Are they right? I'm just the new pastor's wife. Maybe I had an experience of what I knew to be true, but then this bandwagon was making me doubt it.
Yeah.
And then shutting me down. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, because we live in this world of so many groups that we're constantly moving between and up, like in your case, moving from one group to another within the same context, like a supreme group kind of thing in the view. So this part of our evolutionary nature fuels such biased notions as nationalism, political allegiance, religious zealotry, superfans, and other phenomenon, right? We see these all over, some dude that you idolize, ends up being exposed as someone who's terrible, and they're like, just choose to, what? There's this pull to continue to go along with the group think, whatever group that is, whether it's an actual group or even a virtual group. And that's the problem, is our brains don't know the fucking difference.
Maybe that was the internal thing for me that shattered that connection to that social group, that allowed me to start questioning. Was I had this cognitive dissonance of, I switched, like you said, switched groups within my group, switched subgroups or whatever. And it was this conflict. And so it was making me have to separate and think apart from the group to decide which one was true, which then opened my mind to the possibility that actually none of it was true.
You're like, oh, you guys are dicks. Okay, so now I need to reevaluate. Interesting. So now let's talk about, this is one of my most favorite things. I think this is maybe one of the most important things for us to understand about ourselves. Humans can only have the current experience they are having according to their current state of consciousness. We can't imagine what it was to be us in the past or the future. We could only imagine what it would be like to be now us back
half
then
second.
or sometime in the future. True. True.
Half
Good
second
point.
from now.
Good point. But we can really only understand who we are in our current state of consciousness.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We can't remember what it was like to be a kid. All you can do is remember what it was like to do kid things as you now.
Yeah, and project what
And then
what
you
we
project
know
onto that, right?
Yeah.
When you're like, no, you were a dumbass kid babbling around saying nothing
caught
great.
I've caught myself and recognized, because if you have letters, things that you wrote at the time,
evidence.
which is what I came across. And I had been projecting myself back to my past, and then I read letters, and I'm like, oh, God, you were an idiot then.
Yeah. But you imagine like, I just have my shit together, you know, I'm just so smart. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do. I mean, we can only project our current state backwards. And if we try to imagine the future, we can only imagine us in the future as we are right now, which we clearly won't be because we're not the same as we were in the past.
Right.
But that's the only, we're in that window now. Our mind developed an interesting ability when it comes to this. It is thought that our ability to project ourselves into the past and the future is possibly tied to our unique neofrontal cortex ratio. So again, they think this may be something tied to some ability that we have because of that ratio, this ability to kind of project ourselves backwards and forwards. We as humans have developed a capacity for empathy, leading to sentiments like, you've got to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. You've heard that, obviously, right? We've all heard that. Projection bias largely allows for our ability to even consider such a notion. The issue is we actually can't really do it. All we can ever really do is experience what it would be like to be us in that particular situation. It is as literal as you simply putting their shoes on, and that's it. Your brain, your experiences, your childhood programming, your development, your issues, your biased ideas and opinions, their shoes.
Yeah.
We project ourselves onto everything, mistaking it for a common experience. You know, this is why people are like crazy people spouting ugly, horrible political views will say like, everybody believes like me. I'm just the only one that will say it. I'm just the one that's brave enough to say it. They're projecting, right? They're going, everyone. Projection bias kind of leads us to believe we're special. Because we're locked in our own skulls, and we can't actually really understand anyone else's thinking ever, even if they communicate it to us. We tend to then go like, well, everyone's like me. Everyone knows that what I believe is true, whether they all admit it or not. They're just resisting it, but they know I'm right. You know, we all have that thing. It kind of makes us feel special.
I like when you say believers don't actually believe, because you don't believe. You can't even imagine someone would believe.
Exactly, but my prediction is correct. I'm saying burn. We are purpose-built to connect to humans, and so we project our human experience onto every fucking thing. Pets, cars, locations, everything. And what I project onto people and things is always the same thing. Me. Okay. You project onto your pets, you know, not you, Marnee. Marnee does it. She's like, snap, get away.
Go.
But we tend to project our consciousness onto our pets. We name our cars. We fucking anthropomorphize everything in order to connect to it. Think about cars. Like, we didn't have to make them that way. 2 eyes and a fucking grill that looks like teeth. You know, like, we didn't have to do that. But we made them because I think there's a subconscious thing where we're projecting ourselves onto everything. It's probably also why I see faces in the clouds and stuff, because where our brains are designed to connect to people and recognize people and then connect to them, you know? Now, this is a beautiful thing about us, that we could even seek to empathize with someone else's experience. However, we also must maintain the accurate perspective that we can never truly understand what they are going through, which means we need to listen instead of simply come to conclusions from our own biased perspective.
Yes.
This is like the root of people saying like, well, all black people have to do is do this and then they'll be fine. Fuck off.
Yeah.
You've never once experienced, you have no idea. Like me, I'll just speak from my experience. I've never once experienced institutional racism against myself. I've never once been discriminated against. I've never once walked into a store where they were scared that I walked in or looked at me with suspicion. The cops never look at me like I'm doing anything wrong when I usually am. I skateboard around with a beard and a fucking joint in my mouth, rolling by cops waving. I don't experience the fucking, you know. And so for me to say, oh, well, that's projection. But we're projecting our experience, which isn't theirs, which means especially as we're right now in this moment of looking at these established, ingrained, racist and bigoted stuff that's just in our society. We have to come to grips with it. It's here. Mm-hmm. And instead of pointing fingers and like trying to figure out who the fuck, whatever, like being able to go, let's stop and listen to people who have this experience. And that's where we can't, as people who are not affected by that, come up with solutions. I don't believe that because we don't understand. And so I think we need to listen and we need to go, hey, I can never fully really understand that experience. And so I'm going to have to just like let you present that. And we need to come at from your experience because it affects you and not me. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important. I'm tired of a bunch of white people talking about racial policy. Like, fuck off. Yeah. What are you going to do? There's so much bias in us that how is that? I don't know. I just think that's fucking ridiculous. I don't know. It gets me worked up whenever I see like, oh, we're going to look at and it's a bunch of old white guys. I'm like, fuck you. Like, fuck off. Like, find someone.
Well, and you have a whole lot of different people saying different things because like you will have people of color that have not experienced racism. And so then they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. True. There is not systemic racism. I've never experienced it. So it gets very confusing when you just say only white people don't. No,
yeah. It. I mean, that's true. Like that was very reductionistic. That's true.
My brown daughter actually did not. She was raised in North Idaho where there is racism there, but she did not experience it growing up. Right. I think there's different factors. Like she was a pretty little girl. She didn't get treated poorly around it. She was in a small atmosphere, sheltered atmosphere. But then I know of other brown people in North Idaho that did experience racism. So my daughter could be like, no, there isn't. It isn't there because I didn't experience it. Right. But she doesn't say that. She's aware that other people did, but for whatever her experience was because of the position she was in, she didn't. Yeah. Yeah. But so it happens that brown people will be like, no, that's not what brown people experience.
And I was being like all hyperbolic and crazy there. But what I mean is like, if we are not forming our policy based solely upon the experience, understanding, research of African Americans in this country, say just on that issue. Yeah. I mean, obviously there's tons of other issues. We have issues with Asians. We have issues with Hispanics. We have all kinds of bigoted divides in this country that need to be solved. But right now with the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that, I mean, that makes sense that we talk about that. I just believe we don't do it. I mean, I think we're starting to, and there are places where this is obviously happening and more promoted, but making sure that Black voices are being the information for these policies and not people imagining what it is to be Black people because that we can't do. Yeah. So, when you're at TJ Maxx or some shit and you spot something dope and go over and check it out, and you look at the price tag, you've been in there. When you go to TJ Maxx or Ross, Dress for Less, and you're like, oh, ooh, look at that. And you go over there. You typically find a collection of colorful stickers and numbers printed there. You'll see things like an item with the original price tag of like $600. I've seen that. Written in plain, small black type. Slightly obscured by a more prominent bright yellow tag with $199 sale. And then on top of that, a neon pink tag with $15 in huge numbers, right? We've seen those things before. This is actually a very well-researched and intentional ploy. It uses something called anchoring bias. Our brains are not the supercomputers that everyone wants to believe they are. They have limitations, bottlenecks, errors, and other boundaries that define what it can actually do. It is not all powerful, and no matter what you have heard, you are not only using a small portion of it. Remember that growing up? You only use 10% of your brain. Fuck off. No, that's not true. Why would we feed something in our body that we use 10% of? We would have lost it a long time ago. We use it all. But those things were based off of a research that showed that during certain things, places were at rest while others were firing up. It's not like you're only using. And then people went like, imagine if we turn on the other 90%, we'll fly, or something fucking stupid. But they're not. They're not these amazing supercomputers that can do anything. There are limitations. There are capabilities it simply doesn't have. Our brain had to develop shortcuts due to these cognitive limitations when it comes to processing the information coming in. Due to this, we tend to weight only a few options when confronted with choice, typically using the first or most prominently presented piece of information as a focal point against which the others will be compared. This is known as anchoring bias, and marketing, absolutely on purpose, uses scientific understanding and takes advantage of this human feature all day, every day. Okay, these marketing companies, they have people on staff that are like sociologists, psychologists.
They get me every time.
They know. So if you think they're just like, wow, they figured out how to get me. Oh, they figured out how to get you a long time ago, and they know how to do it.
And even when I know they're doing it, I'm like,
they get me too. No, they get me too. Like, I mean, that's everybody, right? What I'm saying is they love this one, okay?
Yeah.
Because our brain cannot sift through an infinite number of choices. Like I said, the most we can track 5, right? We talked about that earlier. And so our brain tends to take typically 3 is the easiest, right? And it takes that and compares them and makes decisions based off of that, right? Yeah. Not based off of what's the best choice, but like, what can I shortcut and figure this out, right? Yeah. What TJ Maxx doesn't tell you is that piece of clothing probably cost them about 25 cents. And by anchoring you through the presentation of a small collection of discounted prices, it leads you to the decision that you can't pass this up as they walk away with 5,900% profit on that garment. Gotcha. Right? So it happens. You go into everything you see in like Nordstrom Rack or any of these discount places, you know, they'll typically have a kind of a hierarchy of prices. And by the time you're done, your brain is like, you cannot not buy this because it used to be $600 and now it's $15. And they're just like, oh, cha-ching, you know. You also see this taken advantage of in places like restaurants and online subscription levels. Menus typically have 1 or 2 very expensive items, some lower price items, and a bunch of stuff priced in the middle. By arranging things this way, it takes advantage of this anchoring bias, and most people wind up choosing something in the middle where the highest profit margins are. Same thing with subscription levels. There will be a low-priced or free option that has very limited features that apply to only a small number of subscribers. There will also be a very high-price level that very few need, features that cost the company a lot more to provide. But then there is a middle option that has the bulk of what most need. It also happens to be where they make the most money, so guiding you there using anchoring is very beneficial to the bottom line. So like I worked for a company that had levels of services. The very high-priced services, they cost us a lot to fulfill those. Yeah. Right? It cost us more. When customers would need those services and engage them, we fucking could lose money on service. But the middle shit is the stuff that everyone needs. It didn't cost us a lot of money, and we made a bunch of money on it. And that's tends to be whenever you go to subscribe something, there will be 3 to 4 options. And in those options, you will be led to one because that's where they want you to go. Yeah. And if they get some of the expensive ones, awesome. If they get the free ones or the lower price ones, whatever. They don't fucking even cost us anything. But those people in the middle, that's the shit where they want because they're making more profit margin per customer off those. And so they use, on purpose, using the term anchoring bias to hook people into these decisions. Okay. So let's look at a couple more. So, how about neglecting probabilities? This is a fun one. So this particular bias is one that causes a lot of problems in this complex world we have built. We are emotionally manipulated into a lot of false ideas and beliefs through this feature of the human brain. Your chance of dying at the hands of a refugee entering the United States through some illegal alien caravan, that's what Fox News is all talking about, 1 in 3.6 billion. Billion with a B. You are literally way more likely to die from your clothes spontaneously igniting and burning you to death. And yet, turn on Fox News right now, they're like, well, with Joe Biden president, caravans are headed towards the border. Next thing you know, we're all going to die in terrorist attacks from these guys. You have a roughly 1 in 20 million chance of dying in any kind of terrorist act in the United States. Of course, maybe those numbers need to be adjusted a little after January 6th. Think about this, though. You have a 1 in 5.5 million chance of being struck by lightning. Downright likely compared to those other 2 scenarios, right? But you don't walk around going like, I could be struck at lightning in a minute, right? But people are on Facebook posting about how the illegal aliens are coming to kill me. A terrorist. Fuck off. We are told more guns will make us safer, and that gun laws will keep guns out of the hands of good people. And yet, actual empirical data proves more Americans have died due to gun violence and accidents since 1968 than all of those who have died in all the wars America has ever fought in, including the Revolutionary War. Jeez. Okay? So again, by taking advantage of this neglecting probabilities, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of you looking at actual data, you just get whipped up emotionally.
Yeah.
They say something like, do you want to be caught in a situation where a gun could have saved you or your family's life? When in reality, they should say, do you know that buying a gun makes you a whole bunch more times likely to accidentally kill yourself or a family member?
Yeah.
That's what mostly happens.
Yeah.
The number of times a good guy with a gun stops something is so minuscule compared to the number of innocent mom shoots baby.
Yeah.
That happens every year. Mm-hmm. All it's, lots more than it should. And so again, we neglect those probabilities. I mean, 1968, I was born 2 years later. Yeah. That's like my lifetime. More people have died because of gun violence and accidents than all the wars that we fought going back fucking 240 years. That's nuts. Your chances of dying in a car accident? 1 in 19,000. And yet no politician is trying to scare you into voting for them because of this much more likely danger.
Yeah.
Okay? They're fucking with you. Yep. They're fucking with us.
Yep.
They're emotionally hooking us through things that they know will grab our attention, even though the reality of those things is so far outside of reality for us. Yeah. Right? They don't tell you that, it's 1 in 3.6 billion chance you'll be hurt by these people. No, they say they're coming for you, your way of life. They hate you, they just whip you up like that. It's fucked. The problem is we tend to make decisions based off of emotional processes happening below our conscious thought, down in the limbic system where there are no words or logic or reason. Things like probabilities or likelihoods are not considered at all. The emotional capturing of many other cognitive biases in you keeps you from evaluating things on that level, right? It pulls out all of these things. We're confirming information. We're observationally selecting things that we're fixated on, all of these things. I mean, you think about that observational selection bias and these people fixated on Q, they saw shit everywhere that confirmed exactly what they thought, even though it was just chaotic, random shit. Yeah. Same thing, that patternicity, apophenia, all those things are coming together and you can see what happens. We go fucking nuts. Yeah. So let's talk more about one more. We'll talk about correlation versus causality. This is also a huge problem in a world drowning in data. Every day we are confronted with articles and, quote, studies that tell us stuff is true. Like we talked last time, like chocolate is good for you. Chocolate, it will kill you, and wine, whoa, it's good for your heart. Wine, it's terrible for everything, And we see this, obviously, these things are contradictory and what the fuck is going on. Mm-hmm. The vast array of competitive, contradictory, and yet confidently stated conclusions are, for the most part, the product of our brain's obsession with finding patterns. We tend to link data together based on perceived correlations, then coming to some logical fallacies based upon that linkage. And so there are a couple of logical fallacies that have been defined that are directly related to our brain's obsession with finding patterns, which causes us to correlate things together and confuse that for causing each other or one causing the other. And so the two logical fallacies that stem from this is with this, therefore, because of this. Yeah. So something happening at the same time as something, and it's like, it's caused by that. Or after this, therefore, because of this. Mm-hmm. So something happens, and then the events that follow are correlated to that thing.
Mm-hmm. And isn't that the way you look at astrology? Is more correlation, not causation.
Oh yeah, I'll talk a little about that in this. I didn't put that in here, but we can. We live in a world of swirling information, graphs, ideas, and statements. In an almost infinite set of data, there are going to be all kinds of chance similarities and timings happening. The issue is our brains are seeking out these correlations. Based upon these patterns, we then conclude that there is some kind of causal relationship between the two, with no proof beyond our brains picking out a pattern. Mm-hmm. The way I demonstrated this when I would show it to people and stuff in different environments was I'd put up a graph and it'd have two lines on it that tracked perfectly with each other over this set of like 10 years. And the two different lines were labeled, and I blocked off the label of one, and the other one said autism diagnoses. So cases of diagnosed autism cases, right? And the other line tracked along with it, and I always ask them, what do you think that line is? What do you think they say?
Oh, vaccines.
Vaccines, of course. And then I reveal the name of it. It says organic food sales. And so I'm like, so are you guys willing right now, me and you, we'll march on fucking the state capitol where we got to do and tell them to close all the Whole Foods because it's making kids autistic.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, no, that's silly, but vaccines cause it. You know, it's like, oh, no, this is my point, is that all of the anti-vax stuff and the tie between vaccines and autism is based upon this bias of correlation versus causality. The doctors who promoted this, well, primarily one doctor who promoted this, he lost his license. He's been disciplined by medical boards because he's a fucking quack. Yeah. He's a kook. But all those other biases, when you're in a stressful situation, you got a kid that needs help, and you're like all these instincts kicking in, all of their other biases come together to neglect any information that doesn't confirm their to find patterns that show that they're right, to keep them plugged into a group, to not change their opinion once they have it, because now this is like a vital social group. All the shit comes together, and it kind of starts in that case with correlation versus causality. And there's a whole bunch of shit that correlates with each other, just kind of tracking side by side because of coincidence.
Yeah.
But we go like, well, it must be linked, so we got to stop this or stop that or do this or do that. And when science needs to figure out what's actually going on, it may be a causal relationship, but only if we can confirm that. Our brains don't find those things. Yeah. They find patterns and correlate things. Yeah. And like you said, with astrology, I mean, that's largely kind of the way I look at astrology. You're right. Like, some people would look at the planets and where they are as causing these things. And I'm saying, I think things were going on. We were observing. We were categorizing. We were projecting, right? Because we can only project ourselves onto everything, and we project it onto the sky. And then we use these points that are moving in very predictable, slow, regular patterns to correlate things, right? So it's like when this is going on, Mars is over there, not Mars is over there, so this is going on. Right. That's a different thing, right? So it's kind of the way I look at it. And it could be dead wrong. Fucking who cares?
It's just a different perspective, which is good to have a different perspective so you don't get stuck in status quo and all your different biases, like twist your perspective.
Yeah, exactly. As we have seen, we are not rational creatures. We are not wired or built or designed or made to find truth, fact, or reality. Our brains are natural organs just like those of everything else out there, full of blind spots, limitations, and shortcuts. However, our evolutionary track has us specialized in a very interesting and powerful way. Our specialty is the social group. We are a human connecting machine, if anything else. And that specialization is a most incredible outcome. By forming powerfully connected, loyal, flexible, interdependent social groups, we became the ultimate generalists together. Our specialty is quite literally one that led us being able to tackle virtually anything, any environment, any adaptation, any manipulation of our world, because we evolved to be a group of individuals with different talents, interests, and proclivities. These differentiations were pooled together and used as a unit, a macroorganism made up of individually distinct people. And the world we see around us is the technological marvel we were able to produce because of it. It wasn't wrong or bad or evil that we did this. It is what we did based on the consequences of our evolutionary development. We are virtually unstoppable together and have proven that for millennia. That's the thing. We're specialists, but the thing that we specialize make us able, it's like this 1,000-armed creature, right? It's like, yes, we're specialists, but we specialize in connecting into a group, forming these tight bonds, all of these biases developing to keep that intact. And then within that group, it's like we can do anything because we have all these distinct individual things going on. And because of that flexible hierarchy that we have, that thing that makes us special, we can have people in charge at different times that do different things. It's like we're this super organism that can tackle anything because we've got the toolkit in there. It just happens to be individual people. And we can pass knowledge on to each other. We can cross train skills. This is our specialty, is human connection, is a group, is a social thing. And within that, we've become, one of the most unstoppable things on this planet.
That whole, we're unstoppable when we get together and our thing is connection. Okay, that's that whole story of Babel in the Bible.
Oh, right, when God said, imagine what they'll do if they...
Because, they have come together, they're be able to do whatever they put their minds to, so I need to divide them, basically.
Yeah.
Super interesting that, so, I know that's not God, but what it's like people knew back then, like, wow, we're powerful when we're together, let's divide us.
Right. And that myth is in a lot of ancient religion, like before Judaism and stuff, that whole Tower of Babel kind of idea.
Yeah.
And it does seem to connect to our recognition that, holy shit.
Yeah.
When we get together and have the same focus, there's nothing we can't do.
And that there's something outside of us separating us. So
and seeing the beauty and the danger in that, right? Because we've proved it both ways.
And it's also seeing that our tribalism is what separates us. They separate them into language,
right?
Which is like
them probably trying to explain why are we all separate and speaking different languages? But yeah. Like, I don't believe there was this event where the Tower of Babel and stuff. But it's them going like, oh,
that's them
how
writing
did we
a story.
get... Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Them writing a story about themselves. So them observing that, wow, we could probably be better off and be powerful if we banded together, but we're divided by tribes.
Yeah.
And we still think that. Like, we
do.
Like... have that ideal
like national identities, language identities. Yeah.
But we have this ideal, and then some people still fight it as if like that would be bad. Globalism is bad. One world.
Yeah, that's because
one world order is bad.
Other crazy beliefs they have been
fed.
Yeah. The idea that there's some government that's going to be able to control the world as one thing is ridiculous. We can't even keep it straight in individual countries. So, like, the idea that someone's going to, like, fucking rule the world in this, like, whatever, Antichrist kind of ideas or whatever.
I know, but
stupid.
yeah. But I'm looking at the positive ideal of us being able to be a world, say, like, an example of, like, basically the type of government that the U.S. has, but be like global. So like a governing body that's central, but then the states and the locals and all that governs everything like locally.
Yeah.
But we're all like working.
That's what people
together.
thought the UN was going to be in the 50s, you know. One world body of that was telling the countries
that's an ideal that we can imagine. And
it's an ideal. I mean, that's fucking Star Trek, right? That's any movie that has a utopian idea is this idea where we like lay down our arms, we lay down our differences, and we decide to work together. I don't know.
Yeah.
We have such deep national, tribal, ethnic, language, regional fucking divisions. And like I just went through, every single one of those humans has all of this shit working to keep them plugged in, and those from the outside from, being considered suspicious and enemies and stuff.
Yeah.
So like we all are working this way. I don't know if we can overcome that and come to a point where we're all just going to live together in harmony. There's so many differences.
You don't think that we'll evolve farther than we are? As people, as humans?
No, I think
like
we will.
Years,
I don't think it's going to be in our lifetime.
Oh, fuck no. I'm just like the possibility. Like you're saying,
well, I mean, predicting
you're saying
evolution
that we're just
is
done
tough,
here.
right?
I think we're stopped here, but...
I don't know. Predicting what we're going to be in the future. Again, all I can do is project.
And which is what you're doing, projecting that this is who we are now, so I can't imagine us being something we're not.
Absolutely. I totally hear that.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is...
I'm imagining that we could be something we're not.
And that's what I'm saying is that's an imagining. I don't know. I don't know. We're not any closer to it. Doesn't seem.
I'm not saying I'm not saying that it's even going to be something that will be like soon in any way, even in our children's lives.
It's not going to be soon.
What I'm saying. I'm saying evolution is a slow process, but it doesn't stop.
We can say 1,000,000 years from now things will be better, and no one can fucking hold us to account for that. So we'll say that. How about that? I can also say 1,000,000 years from now we could all be gone, dead, destroyed ourselves. So we don't know.
Refute that either. So we'll just talk on a podcast. That's what a podcast is for, just to fucking shoot the shit.
So the thing is, we tend to buy our own bullshit, too, thanks to those very same brains that make us so formidable. We are totally biased and irrational at our core. I've heard the human experience described as an elephant with someone riding on it. The one riding represents our consciousness, imagining he or she is in control, guiding the elephant, and the one in charge of making the decisions. Meanwhile, the elephant is our subconscious, and while every person riding that elephant may think they're in control, we all know that is an illusion. An elephant goes where the fuck it wants to go, does what the fuck it wants to do, leaving the rider able only to rationalize out a reason why things are happening the way they are.
Hey, that's what Noom uses for my psychological working.
Yeah, Marnee puts an elephant in every room.
Oh, no, that's not what I said.
Oh.
That's what Noom... I don't want this to be
did they use that analogy?
They use that analogy on that.
Noom's not paying us. Noom, you should pay us now, obviously, because we just mentioned you and we're giving you a positive thing. But they use that elephant and rider analogy? That's a common...
All through the... It's like one of the... Yeah.
It's a common sociological analogy, or I guess I would call it neurological.
Psych tricks, they call it.
Psychological. But yeah, there's a common picture where they say... We're all a rider on an elephant, and the rider is our conscious mind, and the elephant is all the shit happening below. Mm-hmm. And we confidently ride this elephant thinking that's going where we want it to go.
No, and they're talking about be aware of what your elephant is saying to you, where it's trying to lead you, and you use your rider to guide it.
Exactly. Right. Good. That's kind of cool. But in reality, elephants go... The reason they chose an elephant and not, say, a horse is because an elephant, we understand fully that we're not in control of this. It's much more in control than we are.
Right.
Well, we can learn to guide it, like you said, confront it,
have to be
deal with it.
You have to be a skilled rider to guide it. You can't just be like sitting on it, not aware that you're the rider guiding. Like you've got to know how an elephant works.
You've got to understand the situation you're in.
Exactly.
Right. And that's what I think concluding this series, that's what I think I want to talk about is these are all happening in all of us. No one's more biased than you. No one's more susceptible to these things than you. You haven't gone to college and figured shit out. None of that will change the fact that our brains do this because evolution developed it in us. Mm-hmm. And the last 32,000 years hasn't changed that because it's not not enough time for evolution to have changed our brains enough to fucking make a difference.
Mm-hmm. So you can layer information, but onto your evolutionary processes, but doesn't change the processes.
Right. You cannot change the root of this. Mm-hmm. You're not going to root out bias in you. You're not going to root out in-group bias. You're not going to root out the fact that your brain tunes into shit you're fixated on. That is all happening. Mm-hmm. All we can do is be aware and then engage our rational processes and really do the hard work of confronting it, experiencing cognitive dissonance sometimes, dealing with uncomfortable facts about the fact that you got dragged into something that is now, man, I've read a lot of accounts of people coming out of QAnon, and they're all pretty shell-shocked. Mm-hmm. Because as these people are sitting there, I saw one interview, I think it was someone on BuzzFeed News or something, and they're interviewing this lady who was super radical on Facebook and led all these groups and fucking a whole deal. And they're playing these videos of her, what she's saying. And she's ranting about satanic pedophiles, this and evil this and all the cues and Donald Trump. And she's just hanging there with her head hung in shame. And she's like, I don't even know. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting here now. I used to look at people, like Islamic terrorists as how did they must be bad that they could be radicalized so easily. And now I'm facing the fact that I was radicalized into a lie, an illusion, and dragged into something that I now look at and go, I cannot believe I was in that. Mm-hmm. Hey, it's understandable.
Oh, totally.
They got there because people took advantage of this shit.
Yeah.
Whether intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah.
Through just shit that we know works because
and
we've done
your
it.
natural brain patterns.
Yeah.
Took
They just
you into it.
hooked them with memes and videos that said the same thing over and over, right? And their biases tuned in and they fucking confirmed it, and they kept them focused and tunneled in on this, and they filtered out all the information that would say that's wrong, you know, and they were part of a group, and then all these oxytocins flowed when they communicate with these groups, which tie them even deeper and even more suspicious of those who would say they're wrong or on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, they're radicalized. They're extremists.
Mm-hmm.
And watching them confronted is sad, but it's also heartening that people are doing that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's demonstration that we can fucking change our shit. I mean, we can't change the fact that all this is going on and that we're susceptible there, but now she can change the fact that, oh, I can notice when this is happening. I can feel this pull in me and go, oh, I felt this before. Yeah,
that's our experience. Our whole, for the last 10 years is being aware. And what I find is, like, I feel like people want to say, oh, that's your wounds finding fault there and there and there. Every time I'm pointing out, you know, that's just like the church. That's just like the church. That's just like the church. It's like, no, like early on, if I was emotional about it, like strongly emotional about it, it felt painful. That was wounding. But as I've healed it, I just like see it. It's like, I'm not upset. It's just there. I see that. I see that. I see that. These people act the same as the church people did. It's everywhere. And we've been able to shift out of our bias group.
Mm-hmm.
And now I am just aware that I can tend towards bias. It's why I won't go extreme left in my politics, because I don't want to just jump to an opposite bias and carry on my brain in the same way.
Swing the pendulum the other way.
I'm trying to stay in this cognitive dissonance place of like, what you're saying makes sense, but this is making sense too, and holding all of it.
Yeah.
And then everyone thinking you're against them because you won't pick a side.
And I think people that would say like, oh, that's just trauma. Okay, first of all, this is part of the biases we have also, in that we'll look at like a religious group as something different than just a social group from an evolutionary standpoint. Mm-hmm. Our brain does not give a fuck if it's about God. But God is a huge projection.
Yeah.
Because that's all we can do.
Yeah.
It's a human projection. Religion is a human projection. Those are just social groups. Your brain doesn't care if it's fucking religion. It's just a group to tie into.
Right.
And it will engage all these biases and cognitive shortcuts and strategies in line to keep you plugged in that group, whatever the ideology.
Right.
Doesn't care.
Right.
That's why Nazis stayed together. Right. I mean, it's the same things that were at work. Right. And so a lot of people would say like, oh, you know, but the church, it's just because your wounds. No, it's like it's like your family that fucking sucks, or the fucking, your friend group that fucking did you wrong or abused you. It's a group. It's a social group. And so it's not about wounds. It's about the fact that that group engaged every single bias you had in your head to keep you in it, just like me.
And groups do. So when you find yourself in a group, it's hard for me to settle into a group. It's like, give me a reason to get out and I will bolt.
Mm-hmm. You're like, what's that, a Dixie cup full of Flavor Aid? I'm out of here.
I'm out. I'm not drinking your Kool-Aid. Flavor Aid. Sorry, your Flavor Aid.
That's a true story. That at Jonestown, they did not serve the Kool-Aid on the suicide day. The practice runs were done with Kool-Aid, but he didn't splurge on the Kool-Aid.
But all the groups that have these high ideologies that people think, oh, this is better. This group is a better spiritual group than this group and all that. They're all employing the same.
Yeah. Yeah. They're all deluded, buying their own bullshit, and fully plugged in based off of all this shit that we just talked about. And so much more.
Here's what I'm like, God damn it. Like, we're social creatures. We need to be part of a group.
We do.
And so I've been like, oh, okay, let me let my guard down and be part of this group. And then I have to reject them because they're being assholes. And so I'm like, nah, I don't want to be connected to that group. Because I'm not going to do mental gymnastics to make it work and like do all this like excuse bad behavior like I did for so many decades that I'm like faced with like, oh, that's really bad, but I'm just going to mentally gymnastics my way around excusing it. Like, fuck no, I'm out. So it's a difficult space to be in.
Yeah.
To be a social creature that needs to be part of a group.
But you're gun
But
shy.
I'm not gonna fucking put up with any group's bullshit.
Yeah. And it's absolutely vital. I know there are people out there like, oh, I'm one of those people that don't need other people. Fuck off. No human is that way.
Yeah.
I mean, these people that want to be alone like to fucking talk to other people on the internet that like to be alone. So I don't know what to tell you.
That's a group.
It's always, we seek out people.
Yeah.
We don't have an experience unless we have someone to bounce it off of. That is what our brain is made. And this is a huge problem in our world. I really do believe this. We did not evolve to elect leaders on a TV screen.
Yeah.
Our brain evolved to evaluate people in person. Mm-hmm. There's subtle clues, body languages, facial tics, things that you can only experience in person, things that we're not aware of that are sensations that are coming in or things that we're noticing that allows us to form a picture of whether we trust someone or what. All of these things are fucked over in this world we live in, where we watch people on screens or we see memes on the internet. I think one of the biggest issues is anonymity. We also didn't develop to be anonymous. And you notice what happens when you give people anonymity, like say on the internet. What happens? They fucking turn into inhuman pieces of shit.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we really need to think about. I've thought about this like from a generational standpoint. You think about like us or like older millennials. We experienced times where if you had a problem with a restaurant, you had to fucking say something to someone there.
Yeah.
You didn't get to go on Yelp and fucking give them a 1 star and tell them and rant and do all this shit that no one could ever trace back because you're DR in Toledo, Ohio, right? Anonymity, I think, is a real problem that our information age has provided to us that I think is maybe not a great thing. Because when we don't have that social responsibility, we end up with QAnon, anonymous, right? It's QAnon. It's because it was an anonymous person, and then all these other anonymous people can post whatever the fuck they want. Next thing you know, people, I really think we need to confront this idea of anonymity being a good thing. Your 14-year-old kid learning that he can be whoever he wants and say whatever the fuck he wants to whoever he wants, no matter who they are or what they do, because no one can know who they are or get to them. Not a great thing. Good. They're going to be a little fucking asshole. And you see this. You see this culture of people just willing to do and criticize and say shit because they don't have to face those people. They don't have to be in social context with those people. They don't have to deal with them as if they're people. Yeah. They're things. And I think that's kind of fucked up. I kind of bemoan that a little bit. I don't like the anonymity that is provided to everyone because I think it dredges up the worst parts of us because it has us outside of that place that we evolved to be, which is fitting in and being dependent on and being loyal to and contributing to a fucking social group. But when we just like anonymously launch bombs at impersonal things, I don't know. Yep. I don't know if that's going to be great for us in the long term. And maybe we can't do anything about it other than maybe start teaching our children and stuff like, hey, you don't get to just fucking say whatever. You create your own little account and say what the fuck you want like you know what the fuck you're talking about. You're a little kid and you need to first learn how to like deal with people, how to think, how to fucking, I don't know. I feel like every student that goes to college should major in the same thing, critical thinking. And then they choose a double major that is some other shit that they apply critical thinking to. I don't know.
Our virtual world is showing that we need more complexity in our education and awareness of self and what's going on. The world has gotten more complex, which brings me to that like article that I read that said that as life expectancy pushes out to like 120 years, the world, because of technology, has become so complex because of what we're talking about. This, like, it's beyond our evolutionary brain point where we're at in our evolution. It's beyond us. And so it is taking our kids longer to mature into adulthood in order to cope with this world.
Yeah.
And I know that as it's been like this like generational gap for us to be like, God, when we were 20, we were doing this. Well, the world wasn't like this when we were 20. The world wasn't as it is now when we were 20. Our 20-year-olds have something different. And so they were saying that they're not going to fully mature into like coming into their adulthood and their careers till like 30 or 40, which we're seeing that.
Take that into account, people who are looking to get pregnant. Just saying.
Just hold on. Yeah. So like they were talking about like, oh, is it delaying people being in the work world? Or are they going to be in the labor force less? And it was like, no, it's just going to shift it by 10 years, 10 to 20 years.
Right.
Instead of going into the work world at 20, 60. You're going to go in at 30 or 40, but we're living to 120. So you're going to be working until 80, which is what we're also seeing. Like our generation is looking at like, we're not going to fucking retire.
Oh, I'm going to work till I die. I'm not going to
retire
retirement
at 60.
I know. I've had young people say that, like, don't you have retirement? I'm like, what the fuck? How old do you think I am? I know you guys think you're the first generation to ever experience all this stuff, but actually our generation is the first one to do worse than their parents.
Yeah.
And it was the first one that all of that stuff fell away. Like, unless you were a cop or a fucking fireman or in the military or some shit, there was no retirement for us. No one was going to work at a company for 20 years, get the gold watch and the fucking retirement plan. That was gone. So I've known for a while that, I'm just going to die working. I mean, that's just how it is.
And also we are healthier and able to.
Yeah, it's
like,
a good point.
We're not like, oh my gosh, we're going to be like decrepit and working. I'm like, I'm just getting started.
Me too.
I just turned 50.
I feel better than I did at 30. I could fucking do way more.
Yeah, I am not about to like end my career in 10 years. I'm just, no.
Yeah, so that's true. There's a bigger picture happening.
Yeah.
And maybe that status quo bias keeps us thinking like it should be the way it was back then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this is the best way.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was only the best way, but that best way happened from another way that was, I don't know, like what.
So you were saying that you don't know that it's good, all this progress. But we are like, we just have to grow.
No, I don't think that's progress. I'm saying I don't like the anonymity that we've provided to people. That's not progress.
No, the progress is the technology. And then we are still who we are. We're still being who we are within the progress. And so what we need is to evolve our complex internal selves to fit with the progress that we've made. That's what you're bemoaning is the anonymity is just like us still trying to catch up with how complex our world is.
Yes.
And it's not that we should stay that way.
Yeah. I mean, my personal view, I'll just share it. I don't think that we should be able to be anonymous on the internet ever. Ever. Because we don't get to, that's not something we get to ever fucking do.
How would you do that?
To make you prove your identity and tie your thing to that. That's who you are. Mm-hmm. So if you start spouting some fucking bullshit that leads to something bad that people get hurt, we fucking know who the fuck you are. Now we got to trace you through all this. I don't know. We've created this world, this Wild West, and I mean that's an extreme example. I'm honestly more concerned with young people right now. I watch my kids play video games and see some of the like young little fuckers that are playing these games. They are not adults. They do not have fully formed brains, and yet we're giving them this anonymity and all this stuff that leads them to conclude that they can just, I don't know. It just seems like a problem to me. It seems like it's going to become a problem when people think they can just say whatever the fuck they want because they can't be held account to it because they're behind this veil of secrecy. We don't live like that. Imagine if we voted a president that all we ever got was like text dispatches from an anonymous thing. Do you want him to lead your... No, fuck you. I need to know who you are. I need to know what your fucking name is. I need to know about you. But then we let our 12-year-olds have anonymous accounts where they get to fucking go out there and do bullshit. I don't know. It just seems like not a great thing. It's not forming great pathways in their brain that's going to be constructive later on in society.
Yeah.
They're going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And they're going to be a problem even amongst themselves. They think it's all fine that they are all the same way, but they'll fucking hate each other because, they're going to grow up and they're going to go like, man, I don't know.
Yeah.
I've just been thinking about that a lot, like in dealing with, when you hear about all these things like coming from an anonymous account. Oh, they found out this anonymous account was run by a 15-year-old in, fucking Michigan and this. And you're just like, wait a minute. Why are we allowing 15-year-olds to be anonymously posting political statements?
How can you even regulate that?
I don't know. Fucking parents need to do their job better.
Stop it. That's never going to fucking happen. What are you talking about?
So you're saying instead of doing anything, just let it happen?
No,
I can tell you exactly. We could do things.
It's not as simple as...
We could do things. So, 13-year-olds would crash a bunch of cars if we let them drive it too. But we don't.
You're right.
Okay, and we pretend that this information
you
is
just said parents, but it's not that parents don't let teenagers drive. It's that the government. So the government has to do it.
Yeah, I do believe that.
Fucking people do not govern themselves like they say they will.
I am not one that believes that the internet at this point, while it was great that it was a Wild West open playground when it was young and fun and full of like funny little things and quirky, it's not that now. No. It's a channel for... radicalizing people into violence around the world. Yeah. It is something that is dangerous, but we treat it as if it's innocuous because it's just words or it's just pictures or it's just this, but it's not, because our brains don't understand anything other than this social connection.
I do think it should be regulated. I was arguing that you said, well, parents should.
Parents.
That was a little...
That's because every time I see a kid, I'm just like, where are your parents?
Where are your parents?
Slap them. I don't hate you. You're a product of their dumbasses.
Shut up. Quit.
They probably had anonymous accounts on the internet.
Stop with your grumpy old man
I'm just kidding. I love kids, actually.
Yeah.
I say that kind of shit. I actually love kids. Kids love me. I love kids more than Marnee loves kids.
Oh, yeah.
I do. If there's a kid around, they're usually like run over and crawling all over me, and I'm fucking, getting them in trouble with their parents because I'm letting them do stuff they shouldn't.
You're a kid yourself.
Yeah. I can't wait to have grandkids. I am going to give them everything, spoil them rotten, and then let their parents deal with the fallout. But anyway, that's we're going to include this one. So, human rationality. It's a belief we all have, but it's a misplaced belief. It's just not true.
Yeah.
And the better we understand that, the more maybe we can engage those rational capabilities, because we are capable of it. It's just, we also are fooled in this idea that we're just operating that way all the time. So I just let myself go and it's going to lead me to the truth. Nope, it's going to lead you far from it. And so we have to engage. We have to deal with some uncomfortable states in our brain that maybe it doesn't like to be in. And that's just the consequence of the world that we've built. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
And you can say I can flee to a commune and escape all this. You won't. You can say I can go here and get out. I can go to the North Pole and be... No, you won't. You have the brain you have and the shit you got going on in there. And we've got to deal with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with a brand new topic. And until then, have a good one. You're going to say bye?
Oh, am I supposed to say bye?
Sure.
Okay, bye.